Hey, is it the Day of the Dead, or is that tomorrow? It's November 1st. So, I wanted to respond to something that RB said in the comments. He makes a lot of really good comments, plus we kind of BS a little bit, because probably both of us have a bit of an attitude. But that's okay. We should have an attitude with the crap we've had to put up with. So, this channel is also meant to be a little bit therapeutic. Anybody who needs the therapy, feel free. Although I do try to keep it kind of clean for the sake of those who are trying to keep their vocabularies unfettered from the things of the world, with whom I would like to share the truths that the eternal truths are mostly a pack of, well, fabricated things in order to create a marvelously successful parasitic industry called LDS Inc., which of course I'm quite prepared to defend. Okay, so in this video here that I did the other day, where we've got Aaron Raw standing here clad in LDS business style attire, but looking more like Jesus. And I think he'd look a whole lot better dressed like Jesus. Not that I necessarily believe Jesus ever existed, but pictures we've got, I'd rather wear the Jesus clothes than the uniform of the holy priesthood. Okay. Especially looks out of place in front of Noah's Ark. Then again, Noah's Ark is about as forthright as the guys in the business suits. So maybe he's got a hidden meaning there for us. And when I did this video, I had this poem come to me. And so I wrote it and put it in the description. And I just think maybe I'll try reading it right now. It might be easier if I did it out of my software, since it's bigger. But I'll give it a shot here. See how I do. And then we'll get into the comment that I wanted to discuss, because when your former stake prez came over and mentioned a particular book to strengthen your faith, I thought I'd like to talk about that subject. Book of Mormon Evidence stuff. Okay, so I completely misstated that as far as that poem goes. I didn't have it in the Aaron Raw video. I had it in my newest video, which was early morning on All Hallows Eve. Anyway, or at least that's when the poem came to me. So, we'll take a look at it. Let me enlarge this. This is the thumbnail from the video. Okay, and so the name of it is Mormonism's Babylonian Mystery School Roots and America's Manifest Destiny as the New Atlantis. Take a look at that in a minute. So, anyway, I try to put some interesting things in some of the videos in terms of pictures with meaning. And so the poem is basically going to be referencing the statue that is called the Statue of Liberty, presented by the French Freemasons to the Freemasons in the United States, the American Freemasons, right after the war. Or not right after, but shortly thereafter, after the French Revolution ensued, I believe. Anyway, if we look at who these statues actually are, and then we have a familiar face as part of Lady Liberty built into it, with the, rays of the sun, of the goddess there, within it. If you're not familiar with some of, the things that are incorporated into these things, then learning a little bit about it might be helpful. Although this video focused mostly on roots of Christianity, which might be offensive to some of our viewers a little bit. I read some things regarding Christian history, or the history of creating Christianity, and At any rate, those of you who see it differently, try not to hate me. I still like you guys. Anyway, like Ron and Maxwell. And I've had many, terrific friends that believe that. Of course, I've got terrific friends, and loved ones into Mormonism too. So, things that I say regarding history and religion aren't intended generally to attack individuals, except for certain ones that I'm pretty sure are advocating things that harm others and benefit them knowingly. And probably ticked off that gal who I sent some nice comments to, who created a new channel like probably yesterday with the help, or not with the help, well, with a little bit of a promotional boost with a couple of videos done between her, collaborating between Hallie Everts and her, which I thought was very nice for her. And her last name happens to be Holland. Pretty sure I saw a comment for her when I got that flurry of girls that were feeling like I had attacked Hallie. Although I said some things about Mormonism she may not have liked, and some historical things, I pretty much have been complimentary of her, but that's not what her viewers seem to think, although they can't seem to come up with anything except for hate mail, like, you're a douchebag! Anyway, this girl didn't say that. She seems like a real nice girl. If she's related to Jeffrey Holland, she might have taken offense on that, because I have been, pretty blatant about how I feel about Jeffrey. Anyhow, let's go check out this poem, and then I'm going to get into the comment, because RB asked me about a certain book called like Mormon Codex, and another one that RB, that your former stake Prez was giving it, and I really want to talk about that subject that's involved with, because I've been pretty involved with that kind of subject along my journey. So let's read the poem and I'll get right into it in your comments. Alright, here it is. And how dare you call my other one Dr. Seuss-like, although I'm afraid you're probably pretty correct on that. The Three Mormons one. Hey, I was pretty proud of it. I like to bash those guys. Okay, so this video is called, as we're looking at it once again, with the goddess Semiramis, Diana, Isis, Columbia, whoever you want to call her, with Melania there as her face for today. Mormonism's Babylonian mystery school roots and America's manifest destiny as the new Atlantis. I hope that might be a little bit of a clickbaitish disappointment for a title, because I got into the Christian roots mostly, and not talking too much about the whole manifest destiny of America as the new Atlantis. But I'll probably do that here later, between looking at the Book of Mormon and seeing what Manly P. Hall had to say about that subject. If you don't recognize his name, he's a very famous lecturer, occultist, Freemason, very accomplished. And he's not talking about weird things, things I have listened to. He's pretty articulate, pretty interesting, actually. Okay, so beginning of the description, it just says the occult roots of Mormon America is manifest, and then it says, is her manifest destiny the new Atlantis? That's my question. Now, here's the poem that came to me pre-dawn Halloween. It says, speaking of the Statue of Liberty, her unhallowed hand holding Lucifer's light, she stands in the bay as the queen of the night, a mother of gods from ages of old. In Columbia's hand the times are foretold. In liberty's name by Freemasons given, desolation she brings to all nations under heaven. She's Diana to some and Isis to others, a torch in her hand, and Lilith her mother. As Venus she rises in dawn's early light, O'er Atlantis she watches, her goal is in sight. An order of ages long lost in the past, its dawn she now heralds in triumph at last. So, that might sound a little cryptic or even offensive to some people not aware of what I'm talking about there, but actually it's all pretty factually based if you do your research. All right, now to the comments. Or now to the subject. All right, so we'll take just a quick look at that in the first place before I get into it. Basically, you asked about the book. Well, I haven't seen that particular book, but bottom line was this Book of Mormon Codex book, and then the other one are going to really be on the subject of I don't want to be totally like pulling a Jedi Mormon here and comment about something I haven't read, but I looked at like a review or something. Not even that. Well, one of them I did actually. The Codex book, I just looked at like an Amazon listing. And so basically what it is, from what I can see, is that it's about a bunch of stuff that we've got apologists, maybe some archaeologists involved in some of this, at least at first, giving us straws to grasp onto, something to say, this gives us evidence that the Book of Mormon is really true. It's what it is, it's what they claim it is. And I can't even find it. I don't multitask very well. Anyway, that's what we're saying. Saying the Book of Mormon is what it claims to be. And so I haven't looked at the particulars that are in here, but generally, if they came up with something, concrete, believe me, we'd be hearing about it at General Conference. You have to ask yourself, what is the Book of Mormon and what is its purpose? And my assertion would be, it's a sales promotion tool. It is one of the pillars, if we want to speak Masonically, that hold up, that one of the twin pillars of Mormonism, that and the first vision. Even though they didn't even have the first vision in Joseph Smith's day, that wasn't part of the that wasn't part of the sales pitch. But the Book of Mormon really is and was. The Book of Mormon was presenting evidence to the world that Joseph Smith was in fact what he would claim to be, a prophet of the God of Israel, who would be divinely appointed to establish God's new kingdom on the earth, with him, basically Joseph Smith, at its head. That's really the purpose of the Book of Mormon. And we can see that it presented, evidences to assert that, God was revealing things to this young fellow, such as the source of the American Indians being, a lost tribe of Israel. Not that that wasn't talked about in those days, it was being talked about, but what this did was try to provide like some sort of authentication, saying, yes, they really are, we've got a record of it, and we've got this record because God has called this young man to initiate his new kingdom, to bring in, to usher in the dispensation of the fullness of times with him at its head. Okay, so that's really the purpose of the Book of Mormon. At least that's the way I see it, and that's the way we see that it is used as a sales tool to market Mormonism. So the whole, you got the gold plates business, and you got this, that, and the other. But that's the reason that we have it. It's almost not doctrinally relevant to Mormonism anymore, because basically the Book of Mormon was all about Christianity. It was about 19th century Christian discussion, and then it has all this, it has all the storyline and so on and so forth to keep us interested. And within these stories are incorporated various New Testament style, even during the Old Testament times, Christian gospel contentions, or discussions, doctrines, and so forth, trying to explain certain things a little more clearly than they might have been in the renditions we've got in the Elizabethan English, especially where Joseph Smith takes some of the things from the letters of Paul and makes them sound a little clearer, a little easier to understand, puts them in a little clearer format, like the discussion on faith and so forth, or the faith, hope, and charity one. So you're talking like Alma 32, and you're talking Moroni chapter 7. Have I got that one right? Where he does the faith, hope, and charity. Moroni is basically just copying Paul and reiterating things. Or Joseph Smith's doing it through Moroni, or Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon, or not Sidney Rigdon, probably Oliver Cowdery. Who knows? All that stuff is conjecture. And then this other book was, Joseph Smith's sources for the Book of Mormon, those are conjecture. But the bottom line is the authority to establish and run LDS Inc. comes from the belief instilled in members of the church that indeed the God of Israel is at the head of this church, and therefore, runs things authoritatively through this administrative structure called the priesthood, and you need to listen to them because they are God's agents, representatives, and brokers. They are selling the tickets to heaven, and you need to pay up or you can't get in. You can't get into the temple. You can't get those sealing blessings to stay with your family, and if you don't keep paying, you're cut off. Everything that you did before is lost. It's like being in some kind of a pyramid scheme. And if you get out, everything you've invested is lost. So it works very profitably. And so that's the real purpose of the Book of Mormon. And so they need to hold the Book of Mormon up. If the Book of Mormon fails, Mormonism fails. At least it would seem to me, because once these things are, shown, once you realize that these things are not true, then you realize that, the whole house of cards falls, and these guys have no authority, and they're just BSing you, and it's a big scam, just like the Jehovah's Witnesses is, just like SDA is, just like Scientology is, just like the Catholic Church is. They're all a big scam. And so that's why it's important. So they've got this, they've got these things that promote belief by saying, hey, there are some artifacts that look like this culture, has some similarities to some things described in the Book of Mormon. Okay, great. So what? Jack West used to do those things. Oh, these are baptismal fonts here, in Peru, where the Incas were or something. They were baptizing people. Whatever. And this is the kind of thing I see sometimes from Christians that will say, they'll point out, you have no evidence, where are your swords and elephants and all the anachronistic things that are in the Book of Mormon that we just don't tend to find the evidence of. And then they'll say, but the Bible's got, archaeology that supports it. Does it? It supports that what? That Jerusalem exists. Great. And they've got some other things that make it look like, hey, maybe these guys crossed the Red Sea, and then other people say, well, I don't know about that. So these Jews actually did exist that wrote these stories. They may have been writing in the 8th century BC about stuff that, was supposed to have happened a long time before that. And they were writing as if they were Moses, 500 years before then, and basically got caught. But most Christians aren't aware of that. They haven't read The Age of Reason by Thomas Paine, who kind of just points it out. It's not a bunch of fancy talk. It's just a matter of pointing out things so you can look in the Bible and say, I guess that obviously couldn't have been written by Moses, since that city he's talking about being in didn't exist for another 400 years or something. But, Thomas Paine did for, cataloging things in the Bible what I've tried to do with looking at the gospel topics essays and comparing them to the scriptures and going, all right, here's what the brethren are saying through the essay, guys. Dark skin isn't a sign of divine disfavor or a curse. And now let's take a look at 2 Nephi chapter 5, verse 21 that says, it's a curse, and it's a sore curse, so that these people will be, loathsome and not appealing or enticing to the Nephites. It's didn't you guys say it wasn't a curse? Or what it says in Moses chapter 7. They turned black so that all people would despise them. Oh, okay. Oh, that's just a metaphor. Really? A metaphor that you can see so that you'll despise them? The apologetics are ridiculous. So, we've had lots of these things put forth to try to grab onto to say, oh, does this mean the Book of Mormon is true? If they've got, if they've got something that resembles a culture that was mentioned? Well, if Joseph Smith's taking stuff out of, say, maybe the Aztec stuff, of course, that's not really going to correlate for a time. But if you in the Conquest of Mexico book that some people think that he may have taken some material from, with the well-armed Spaniards with steel swords and things like that, attacking the, cities of the Aztecs or those sort of things. Lamanites without the same type of weaponry. But somehow the Lamanites win. And in real life, the Lamanites lost. The people, in the Lamanite position in the story, the American Indians, because actually they weren't able to contend with the people that had more modern weaponry. So, kind of doesn't really support things when you find out that the Lamanites, they beat the Nephites even though they were running around in a loincloth and these other dudes had full, they were knights in shining armor. So what I'm saying is, archaeological finds that might support some sort of identification of a people's culture that resembles, or even if it matched something that's written into the Book of Mormon, doesn't authenticate anything. It just might authenticate that Joseph Smith could have known about this either from books, which there seems to be a fair amount of evidence he could have had, or through supernatural means, which aren't necessarily this God of Israel, okay, or validating the theology that goes along with it. It's just a faulty premise to say, oh, okay, because somebody said something, because somebody knew something that was true, but that they might have had to obtain through supernatural means, that says, okay, that they're a prophet of the God of Israel, and that the theology presented by this person is to be accepted as absolute truth. That's ridiculous. If we see stuff on Nostradamus and it's always some kind of veiled thing and people are trying to interpret it. Well, what if Nostradamus or somebody said, hey, this is going to happen on such and such a date or whatever, and gives some kind of, revelation. And I've had stuff like that happen. I have been told, go here and do it now, otherwise this is what's going to happen. About something that I had no idea of, but I obeyed, and, someone's alive today because of it. They would have been dead, and it was one of my children. I was awakened by someone I couldn't see. At a park I'd never been at, that had water that I was unaware of, and their mom was a little behind them, a little too far behind them. The children had gotten ahead, and I was really tired, and I thought, I'll just lie down under this tree for a moment. Well, there were 2 mothers involved, plus me. Not that I'm a polygamist, it was her friend, okay? Let's not get... But, some of the children had gotten ahead, and there was some water, and I was not aware of it. And I laid down under this tree, and there was, there's a stream and a pond and a waterfall that went into a pond. We'd never been there before. It wasn't where we lived exactly. It was a little distance away. And I fell asleep because I was really tired. Because I'd done some athletics in the morning. So, but I was trying to be a good dad and do the family thing, but get a little bit of athletics in the morning. And I was kind of worn out. Maybe I'd overdone it. And then I was told, go to your children lest they drown. And I look around, there's nobody there. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, blah. And I thought, so I kind of lagged for a minute thinking, what the heck why am I getting this? There's no water here. I'll just go back to, let's relax a minute and more, and then I'll get over there. And then I was told again, go to your children lest they drown. I look and there's nobody there. And I'm like, sheesh, I better act on this. So I just run. I sprinted as 100 yards or something. I get there and I couldn't see. There was like a creek. My daughter had stepped in the creek. And there was slippery rocks, and it was right next to a waterfall. She'd fallen down, and right when I got there, this was happening, and she fell down. I looked down, and there she is. She's coming up for air, trying to gasp for breath, drowning. And I jumped, down. It wasn't that far, 10 feet or whatever, from the top of the waterfall, and jumped down there, and I went right to her underwater. So, yeah, I believe in the spiritual world because I know of it from multiple things. But does that mean that the gospel that's presented in Mormonism is true? Or if I presented some other thing and said, I was able to have this special knowledge, and it otherwise proved that or something, would that mean that the entire belief system associated with that was true? No, it wouldn't. But for me, that was a validating moment as far as strengthening my belief within Mormonism. So I thought, well, it goes along with my belief system. It was probably it had to be like a guardian angel, because the Holy Ghost isn't usually an experience where it sounds like somebody's talking to you and you look and you can't see them, But I've had that happen in the temple and been given information that checked out that I did not know, There's a lot of people that I know that have had really amazing experiences, including face-to-face talking with people in the temple, people that aren't mortal, and elsewhere not in the temple. I've seen things in the spiritual world. I've seen things, in the physical world acted upon by an invisible force, and other people have too. Gnarly stuff. People in the occult know about this. I'm not in the occult, but I have studied a few things. When things were presented to me in life by Freemasons, witches, ex-witches, people I've just known. Just life presenting things that just blow your mind, and you're like, why was this shown to me? Does this happen in the temple? I thought the temple was protected from bad influences, And you're like, whatever, I've shared on other experiences. I'm not going to get too far into that, but what I am saying is that there is this mystique that is built up by the brethren. It's been started with Joseph Smith. Hey, I've got these golden plates. You can't see them, or it'll kill you if you see them, unless you're one of these special guys that can visualize them, But believe me, they're here, and you can pick up this stuff, these plates that you can't see, but they weigh what tin would weigh, not what gold would weigh. But let's just forget about that. And we can forget about the thing that Moroni said he was worried that Joseph was going to turn to, try to use him to get rich, because the apologists don't want us to think about that, because they say things like, oh, well, they weren't really gold plates. They were, gold leafed, gold alloy, whatever. Because they always have to keep changing the story. But that wasn't the original story. And like I said, it goes against what the angel supposedly told him. And why would an angel be worried anyway? Shouldn't an angel have, the knowledge that God would be giving him if he's representing him? Would God be worried? Or would God know what he's going to do? According to the definition of the Hebrew God, he'd be all-knowing. But throughout the Book of Mormon, we see evidence that this God doesn't know everything. When he has to ask the brother of Jared, what's wrong, dude? Oh, you saw my finger? Did you see anything else? Of course, he wouldn't say that if he was all-knowing. In the New Testament it says, and Jesus, knowing their thoughts or perceiving their thoughts, said unto them, why have you these thoughts in your hearts, or whatever. So the New Testament writers were a little brighter than Joseph Smith. They were able to incorporate more wisely the doctrine they wanted to have into the story, and instead of not have the character violate the belief we're supposed to have about the character. But Joseph screwed things up pretty badly in the Book of Mormon, especially in the Book of Ether, chapter 3. Not just there, but there's a bunch of goodies in that chapter, let me tell you. So it goes along with the, whisperings in the temple. Oh, the Lord walks these halls, like they tell the youth at the baptisms. Or, like I said, I was in the temple once when they essentially said that Jesus was in the temple that day, meeting with people up in the, like Solemn Assembly Hall or something like that, I mean, they basically passed on that belief with what they said, like they try to be like a veiled, this is really sacred, so I'm not going to exactly say it exactly, but, like Boyd K. Packer in General Conference 1980 when he said, we do not disclose the details of the sacred interviews that qualify us to be especial witnesses of his name, but we have them. And to me, that was a big impact. I'm like, well, that guy just said he saw Jesus, or I've heard Richard Scott or Jeffrey Holland say things like, I give you a more sure word, to lean upon. So, basically he's quoting Peter saying that, he's had his calling and election made sure. Well, I'm sure he's had the second anointing ordinance in the temple, but as far as, all that does is let him be able to lie without feeling... Actually, I'm pretty sure he knows that the deal is that it's a hoax, but, so the fallacy that Joseph Smith, if you're one of these people that, like you, RB, that says, give me a break, dude, he's looking at a rock, well, like I said, if you've ever seen anything like that happen, I haven't seen anybody use a brown rock as a seer stone, but, I have seen some stuff that violate our, physical rules that we know of. And, people use things. They use dark mirrors. They use Ouija boards. They use crystal balls. And apparently they use seer stones, and maybe some people still do. As long as they dedicate, consecrate, set them apart, use the magical terms that Joseph Smith brought into Mormonism from the magic world. Terms familiar to us in the church, but where did they come from? He uses terminology that comes from the magic world, witchcraft, and Freemasonry. A lot of times, and we think that, that's just part of Mormon culture, it's probably a revelation. It's like, it's about as much as a revelation as the General Conference is for a 501c3 corporation, Like when you find out the other churches have General Conference and because of corporate rules. Anyway. It's very possible for people to receive revelation, but it doesn't mean that it validates a belief system. That's what I'm saying. Any more than, finding archaeology that supports that a people lived somewhere. It's like the whole Nahum thing. Oh my God, Joseph Smith couldn't have known about this. Well, some of these writings sound like, there were travel logs and things published. Maybe he did have. But if he didn't, Why couldn't he see it on a seer stone or in a crystal ball or do automatic writing or a Ouija board or just do like me? Be relaxing under a tree and be told something that was absolutely true by someone you couldn't see and that, can save a life. And like so many other people have had. And I know people very well that have had a very distinct revelation, whether it's verbal or not verbal, that made a big difference and was not emotionally or psychologically based, including healings that are not coincidence. And I'm not talking about that right now. We're not going to really get into it right now. I think I'm going to make this a pretty quick video. But, things like that, supernatural things, healings and things that happen, amazing stuff can happen with or without, it's not, the Mormon priesthood isn't jack squat. It isn't a thing any more than when people say God, like he's your next door neighbor, is a thing. You pull things out of a storybook doesn't make it real. The brethren saying, the Lord said this in the Doctrine and Covenants through Joseph Smith, or the Moroni said this, or whatever, It's just crap they pull out of their fairy tale and pretend it's factual evidence, like it's the dude next door, and it's not the dude next door, okay? But some of us know of an unseen world, and none of that means that the belief system that is filled with lies in its own scripture is true. That's the bottom line with the Book of Mormon. That's the simple way of looking at it, is to look at it, see what rules are given for the conduct and character of the God of Israel, and does he abide the rules or does he not? Is he truthful or is he a liar? Are there contradictions or are there not? It's not about being super scholarly. And besides that, even the scriptures say, woe unto the learned, for they think they're wise, blah, blah, blah. And then you hear these idiotic apologists saying, well, you're not an Egyptologist, so you can't even talk to us about the Book of Abraham. The only thing Egyptian in the Book of Abraham is the stinking facsimiles that Joseph Smith completely mistranslated and said that perverted Pharaoh was even more perverted Elohim talking to two males while he looked like he was Pee Wee Herman getting caught in the movies. So that's about, that's what I told that guy Leo Winiger. I'm like, dude, I don't need to be an Egyptologist to know that the Book of Abraham is filled with false information right there in plain English. And as Joseph Smith says, this pervert is your God, talking to two dudes while he's got his pants off and looking like he's been doing the wrong thing. Elohim, the ultimate wanker. That's just screwed up. And I think I'll end it with that. I think that really typifies what BS these scriptures are. They're filled with contradictions, and like I said, I've tried to point that out in a lot of the videos. So if God isn't truthful, but he says he is, that's a problem. If he contradicts himself in the LDS scriptural canon, that's a problem. If his new prophets contradict his old prophets, it's a problem. In the name of the Age of Reason, like, share, subscribe if you like. Amen.